Hi and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here. Welcome to day 7 of my 7-day sketching challenge, the last day. Or is it? Watch till the end to find out whether or not I may be continuing with this regular sketching routine. Who knows? But for number 7, I'm going to be sketching this summer scene. I've used a sort of a twilight picture here from Pixabay as inspiration. The link to the photograph will be in the description below. But I've decided to make it brighter and more summery, just to keep things nice and easy and nice and fresh. And I've simplified the shape of the tree a lot. I'm working very small. This is about 6 inches by 3.5 inches. It's a Seawhite of Brighton mixed media sketchbook, so the paper's a bit difficult for watercolour painting. But I'm going to do my best and just rough out the sketch as I normally do, picking out the simplest shapes and just roughing them in with an HB pencil. You can see I've got a border of washi tape, which is a low-tack craft tape, which creates a nice border and keeps all the sketches looking sort of fairly fresh when the border is removed. We get that nice white edge. I'm using an HB pencil for this because that's a nice medium hardness or softness of pencil. It's not too soft so that it will sort of smudge, and not too hard so that it will indent the paper and sort of create marks if we don't want it. So the pencil sketch is really quick, really rough. I'm not worried about whether it looks right or not. I'm just trusting the process of simplifying the photograph by looking carefully and observing the details in the photograph and just using just a few lines just to try and indicate what I want. So I've got my distant tree line, I've got a mid-ground hedge behind the tree, then the tree itself and this lovely fence that's just sort of coming out towards us and showing a bit of perspective and disappearing off on the left side. I've been really thrilled by seeing how many people have been sketching along with me and sharing their work on Instagram using the hashtag Lois Davidson Art. It's been lovely to see your sketches, and I'm really impressed at how brilliant and fresh they all are. It just goes to show that sketching small and quick like this can really help with your progress, and more importantly, it can build confidence. And I think confidence is one of the most important things when you're learning to paint with watercolour and learning to sketch. I'm going to wet the page all over using my size 14 Escoda Perla synthetic round brush because I'm going to be painting this scene wet in wet. So this is cerulean blue, and I've put a tiny touch, not too much, just a very tiny touch of burnt sienna in it, just to sort of warm it up a bit, make it slightly darker than the very sort of garish bright colour that cerulean blue comes up as. Then using horizontal brush strokes and gravity, because my board is at an angle of about 45 degrees, I'm just washing across the page with this blue and covering the whole sky area. I've mixed up a green with a bit of sap green with a touch of cerulean blue and a touch of raw sienna in it, a bit of burnt sienna, just to make it a bit more warm and earthy, just filling in the grass area. Now this is a sort of a brownish, greyish colour for that distant tree line, trying to keep it fairly narrow to show the distant trees in the background. Bringing it across the whole painting, although that area will get covered up now with my green. Now this is a mixture of sap green along with as I say, it's got burnt sienna, a bit of raw sienna in it, a little bit of cerulean blue, and a tiny touch as well of perylene green. Those are my two ready mixed greens that I like for quick sketching. And I've dropped that mid-ground hedge in with keeping a nice variety of height. So I've got a nice tall tree in the middle, smaller trees around the edge, and I'm just quickly dropping in a few dots and dashes of green around where I've drawn in my branches of my tree, and then dragging some of that darker green across the foreground, up through until the midground, getting slightly narrower with my brush strokes as I go further back, then just tidying up and maybe adding a few little dashes with the point of the brush flattened out to sort of make it look like a few little tree trunks or bush stumps in that hedge. This is my palette knife. I'm dragging it through the damp paint in the sky and that hedge to get some lovely light tones going back to the white of the paper for my tree branches. So I'm just using the tip of this palette knife and then getting in a few of those little sticky, twiggy sort of marks into the hedge. So those little lighter areas will just give me a bit of variety, a bit of light, a bit of sparkle. And going back with cerulean, perylene green, my dark colour, and with the tip I'm just getting some darks into the hedge. And just a few little dark accents, not too much at this stage, I can go darker later once I see how it dries, but a few accents into the canopy of our main tree. And then I can come down and with just the faint paint that's left on the brush, I can start to begin to indicate a few shadows coming from the tree and maybe from the fence posts, leading towards the right as my light source, the sun, is out of sort of view up to the left, top left is where I imagine the light to be. And now using the palette knife, I'm just going to scrape through to the white of the paper, through the foreground grasses, just for a few little suggestions of sort of grasses and weeds, texture, something in nothing. And now going back in with a bit more perylene green around the light marks that I've scraped out, just to add some shadows and a little bit more tone across the foreground, again enhancing that sort of something and nothing detail. And now I've added a little bit of alizarin crimson to my browny green colour, mixed from the cerulean blue with the burnt sienna in it, and I've darkened up that distant tree line. I'm just going to add a little bit of variation to the size of the tree line at the back, so it looks as if there are some slightly taller trees in the far distance. I made that colour a bit cooler, and that hopefully will just push that distant tree line further back and bring everything else forward. Just before I leave it to dry, I'm using the palette knife again just to scrape through that damp paint. You can see it's leaving some nice white marks, and that just gives me a few highlights. Now it's time to leave it all to dry. So here it is, it's dried nicely. It's time now to just pick out a few choice details just to bring the sketch together. And the first thing I'm going to focus on is the fence. So I'm going to mix up a brown mix with my cerulean blue, a little bit of burnt umber, a little bit of burnt sienna, and I'm going to use a small calligraphy brush and paint in the fence posts, starting fairly wide with the ones nearest to us. Then they'll get closer together and smaller as I follow the perspective of the scene back into the distance. I'm just sort of losing the fence just in front of the mid-ground hedge. Actually, apologies, this isn't my calligraphy brush, this is a rigger brush to get a nice fine line for the fence and the fence posts. It's a small rigger, about a size 1, I think. Then when I've got the fence in, I'll put a slightly darker mark down the shadow side of the fence, which is the right side, because the light's coming in from the left, and just underneath those fence posts and planks. Not too much, just enough, and then just a little bit of something and nothing grasses growing around to sort of suggest grasses growing around the base of the hedge. And then with the same colour, I'm going to work on the shadow side of the tree, trying to keep a few of the paler marks that I pulled out so that it looks like sort of suggesting maybe birch bark, something like that, sort of, so we can see some of the lighter parts of the trunks and the trees. And then bringing some fine lines up in and around the light lines that I scraped in with the palette knife. Trying to sort of join the branches up into the canopy. Still keeping it fairly light, trying to sort of suggest more than overtly paint, and then darkening up the shadows a bit. It's just the finishing touches really. It's where the painting or the sketch takes on a life of its own, and according to how your sketch looks is how you need to finish it off. Keep stopping, stepping back, having a little look, seeing how it looks, and then just making small adjustments as you go, because you've nearly finished. And remember, we're trying to keep it loose. We're not trying to get bogged down too much with too much detail. I'm going to dip into my Perylene green and with a small calligraphy brush just now dot in a few darks up near the top of the canopy just to add some sort of shade into that tree. Not too much, just enough though, just dot a bit here and there. Put a slightly darker line just to separate that plane of land in the distance with the field in front of it. I think that might be a little bit too dark, so I think I'll just soften that back a bit. I think that just gives me just enough differentiation there. So I'm going to call that finished. I think that's the last sketch of this 7-day challenge finished now. I'm going to remove the washi tape and have a look at it. And I think that's okay. I'm pleased with that. It's got that nice light effect. I think the perspective works well and the greens work well against that lovely summer blue sky. I really enjoyed challenging myself to 7 days of sketching, and those of you that have sketched with me, I hope you've enjoyed it too. So now it's time to take a look back at the 7 sketches that I did over the week. And then it'll be time for some reflection as to where to go next with this sort of sketching project that I've started. So this was day 1, and I really enjoyed getting the forced perspective of this boat sort of stuck in the shallow water at low tide. And then day 2, an Irish scene from the Ring of Kerry. It was lovely to try and get that green and grey atmospheric look that's so typical of Ireland, and I really enjoyed the way this sketch came out. And then for day 3, it was a line and wash with a sunset and these silhouetted trees. I think my favourite bit of this is the foreground, the stubble field in the foreground, I think works well. Day 4 is, I think, probably the least successful sketch out of the lot, and it was done from my imagination rather than using a photograph for reference. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I don't think it works quite so well, because my imagination hasn't quite got the scene right. However, I really enjoyed painting it and learnt a lot from it. Now, day 5, I think, is my favourite out of the whole week. I really enjoyed the movement and the energy in this painting, and I hope you did too. Day 6, back to the Ring of Kerry, and this time a slightly more still, peaceful, less windswept atmosphere. And then day 7, this lovely sunny sky with this birch tree and the distant hedge and the distant trees, and I really enjoyed sort of peaceful, warm summer feeling of painting this one. So what did I learn from this 7-day challenge? Well, to start with, I learned that I love sketching small like this and will continue to do so. So I shall be posting more sketches in the coming weeks because I'm finding it really good practice. It really takes the pressure off doing it slightly small, but I will go up a size from A6 to A5 as this paper was a little bit small. So I'm going to start more sketching next week, but this time with slightly larger paper, and I'm also going to be using proper cotton watercolour paper because I found this mixed media paper quite a challenge to paint on, but that in itself was a lot of fun. So to sum up, I'm going to keep sketching like this for demos here on YouTube for a while, but obviously with different subject matter, but larger on cotton paper. So it won't be a 7-day challenge, but if you want to continue sharing your work on Instagram and using the hashtag Lois Davidson Art, I'd love to see your work if you continue sketching with me several times a week. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks so much to those of you that have joined in and sketched along with me. It's been so much fun. I look forward to seeing more of your work hashtagged Lois Davidson Art on Instagram. So please give us the thumbs up and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And if you click on the bell icon, you'll be notified every time we post another video. And thank you so much to everyone who supports us on Patreon. So we'll see you again soon, and happy painting and happy sketching. Bye.